This is lecture 28, The Rise of Russia. Russia has a number of unique features, both in the sense of history and in geography. Let's look at geography first. Russia has the longest coastline of any nation, but this coastline is mostly useless as it remains frozen. Russia also has because of its geographic location, has a Mongol past that other Europeans do not share. Russia has traditionally been viewed as probably the most backward of the European nations. Of course, Russia extends across Europe and Asia all the way to the Bering Strait, and then westward to the Baltic Sea. I believe Russia, what do we have in the United States? 4 time zones: Eastern, Central, Mountain, and Pacific. Russia has 11, to give you some notion of the immense size here. And of course, because of Russia's proximity to old Byzantium, it adopted the Orthodox Christianity practice there. Some enduring themes of Russian history: territorial expansion, both north, east, obviously across Siberia, west into Eastern Europe, and south toward the Black Sea and South Central Asia. Russia changes shape and size through the centuries. If you look at the maps that we provide you, and you can look at videos, short videos of Russian territorial changes, and you'll see that it's like an organism expanding and then contracting. Russia, of course, is one of those gunpowder empires that we talked about in our last lecture. Other themes of Russian history, again, geographical limitations. Again, this long northern border is on the Arctic Ocean and therefore is unusable by the Russians. So we have a push toward the Baltic Sea, the establishment of St. Petersburg, the westernmost Russian city. This allows Russia access to the open waters. You have a push to the Pacific. If you follow the Russian border all the way to the end, you'll come to the city of Vladivostok, within rock-throwing distance of North Korea. This city was founded because of the warm water available there in the Pacific. And then, of course, there's a traditional push toward the Bosporus Strait, on the southern shore of the Black Sea, again, an attempt to gain access to the Mediterranean and the open waters. Other themes in Russian history: there is cultural and language divides between the Russian elite and the average Russian peasant. The peasants speak Russian, the elite generally speak French. Other themes: there is an urge to modernize in Russia, to make Russia more like Europe. There's also a traditional lack of capital in Russia. Until the 20th century, Russia's only capital was grain. There's an ongoing conflict between the city and the countryside, as the urban areas need the peasants' grain, and the peasants do not want to give it up. So there's constant conflict between city and country, between urban and rural in Russian history. The Russian leadership, in its desire to modernize the country, needs the peasants' grain to trade, to purchase expertise and managers and European experts to build an industrial base. Let's talk about Russian expansionism a bit more. Of course, in the 15th, 16th centuries, the Russians are going to drive the Mongols out of their territory. This allows the Russians to follow the Mongols and extend their rule. Russia's adoption of the Third Rome makes it the defender of Christianity and willing to travel to defend the faith. Russia thinks of itself as the Third Rome in the sense that Rome in antiquity was the capital of Christianity. And of course, Rome fell. And then the capital of Christianity shifted to Constantinople. And it fell as well in 1453. So now Moscow, it will be the third Rome, the third center of Christianity. We'll see something similar to this in the 20th century with Russia. Not pursuing or defending Christianity, but pursuing Marxist revolutions and defending communism. This will give Russia a nice cover for expansion as well. Russia's southward expansion is going to create ongoing conflict with the Turks, with the Ottoman Empire. And Russia's expansion into Southeast, or rather Southern Asia, is going to gobble up much of the Islamic world as well. Russia's westward expansion, well, Ukraine. Ukraine, sometimes called the breadbasket of Russia. It's where the bulk of the grain is grown in that country. Russia, of course, is going to continually try to expand into Eastern Europe. Think of Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, the Balkans. All these states will be at some point vulnerable to Russian expansion. Russia's eastward expansion, of course, across Siberia, all the way to the Bering Strait, and then, of course, in the 19th century, across the Bering Strait into Alaska, Canada, and California. You may remember Secretary Stewart purchased Alaska from the Tsar, I believe in 1867. This was a great bargain for the United States, and of course it blocks further Russian expansion into the Western Hemisphere. Russia shares a border with China, with North Korea, with the Central Asian states, all the way to Europe. I counted it one time some years ago, and when it was still the Soviet Union, and Russia at that point shared borders with 14 other countries. So another enduring theme of Russian history is this sense of being encircled or surrounded by enemies. And you can see why. The United States, what do we border? 2 countries? Imagine bordering 14 countries. Alexa de Tocqueville likened Russia's eastward expansion across Siberia to the expansion of the United States westward at the same time. So as Russia is moving eastward towards the Bering Strait, the United States is moving westward across the Blue Ridge into the Ohio Valley, across the Mississippi, the Great Plains, and all the way to the Pacific coast. So there is some similarities here. How to hold this vast empire together? Well, autocratic authority is given to the Tsar. The Tsar has absolute power. The authority of the central state is exemplified by the Tsar. Agreements are made between the state and the landlord class to make this possible. Landlords are given authority over the peasants and the land. Landlords, in turn, give their support to the Russian state. Let's talk about this theme I mentioned earlier, Russian modernization or westernization. How to be more like Europe. Tsar Peter the Great is a key figure in this story. Peter wanted Russia to be seen as a European power. He therefore sought to imitate certain European institutions. He traveled incognito to the Netherlands and other places in Europe to learn shipbuilding techniques and other things. Of course, it was hard for Peter to travel incognito because he was 6'7", probably the tallest man in Eurasia at that point. Peter institutes certain reforms to try to make Russia look modern, or at least more like Europe. He institutes a beard tax. The traditional Russian peasant has a long beard. Peter believed this makes Russia look backward, so he institutes a tax. If you're going to grow a beard, you're going to have to pay for it. Russians began to adopt Western dress. European cultural institutions are imported into Russia, the ballet, for instance, and other art forms. Importation of the German custom of using the German fir tree as a Christmas decoration, another import. Educational reforms are instituted to try to produce an educated elite. State-sponsored scientific work will begin. The academies are established, scientific culture promoted. So Peter and the czars following him are going to continue this effort to try to modernize Russia. We'll see this come to its culmination in the 20th century with Stalin, which of course is in the second part of this class. Russian absolutism. Absolutism refers to power in the hands of the king, absolute power. Absolute rule in Europe precedes that of Russia, but Russia soon adopts it. The Russian Tsar is all-powerful. The state and all of its resources are at the Tsar's disposal. A Russian navy is created. A bureaucracy is established to maintain the Tsar's control over the entire empire. Peter, again, is of course sort of central figure in this modernization effort. I mentioned that he imposed beard tax on the Russian peasant. He also deleted the traditional Russian wedding gift of a whip to the groom, symbolic of patriarchy and of the man's ownership of women. Peter believed this made Russia look backward, and he deleted that. Peter did not import liberalism or parliamentary systems or reform for the serfs. He was more interested in military institutions and industrial institutions. Peter and Russia's ongoing attempts at modernization has systemic problems, that is, problems that are part of the system itself. Peter doesn't really want a merchant class. The Russian landlords don't really want a merchant or a commercial class. The peasants want to be left alone. How do you modernize such a place? Again, it'll take to the 20th century before this is truly accomplished with Stalin. And Stalin will do it by force at the cost of many millions of people's lives. Let's draw some conclusions here for this discussion about Russia. Russian art would enter the European canon by the 18th century, of course with music, with literature. Russian military power would certainly impact European history. Just think of the failed invasions of Napoleon and of Hitler in the 20th century. The traditional Russian Orthodox Church is going to avoid the Reformation that takes place in Europe. Should Russia adapt Western values or not? This is, again, an ongoing question. You can even see it today with this continuing conflict with Russia. Is Russia fundamentally European or Asian? Is Russia outside the general trend of Western development? Things like democratic institutions, a market economy, the rise of individualism. A lot of these things seem to be absent in Russian history, making Russia a unique place in the European and in the world stage. Thank you.